So let's start for the second round today. Just one thing again. We're talking about understanding economics. There was last semester, the first semester, a question. Can you put the mobile phones away, please? There was somebody answering a question, meaning making some calculations which had been perfect. And he did it fast. And then I asked, can you define the terms of what you calculated? And the reply was no. This is not about economics. This is about calculations, this is about arithmetic, this is about maths, but not about economics. Economics is about understanding the concept and then moving on to the calculations. It is difficult, it is possible. Use value and for the producer, the use value is actually something that she wants to exchange. The producer of pencils is not interested in producing 10,000 pencils per day, the final producer. But the producer of pencils is interested in keeping possibly one pencil for himself or herself and get the rest on the market and sell. So we have the use value. And we have the exchange value. Now we have to understand still how do we deal with this? Do we just go to the market, whatever this market is, and say, listen, here I have pencils, 100 in a box, you can buy them. I want 500 euro for them, or 500 yuan for them. What's it? And you say no, and you say 250, and then we bargain and meet at some stage. This is one aspect, but this is at a late stage an aspect. First, we have to think about what does it cost? What are the costs to produce something? What we did in the first semester was a very, very simplified thing, namely talking about opportunity cost and saying one person produces within 1 hour this and that amount of products, and we did not talk about the price. We only talked about the amount of products. And we compared this possibly with the production of somebody else. And then we said, okay, the one person is good in producing computer programs, the other is good in repairing bikes. It is important to understand this. But at the same time, it is important to think a little bit further what it actually means. Again, don't take things face value. Somebody is repairing a bike. Somebody is producing a computer program, software. What does it mean? Think about very simple things. Think about somebody. Cooperation, division of labor, specialization. Whatever we do, and now I'm talking about economics, whatever we do is part of some kind of social process. If I say I produce a good, and for the production of this good, I need iron or oil as raw material. This goes into the product. I can dig a hole. I can do it on my own. No need for anybody to help me. It's a little bit awkward, but it's possible. Is it an independent activity, an independent work I do, independent of anybody else? Only if I use my hands. As soon as I have a shovel, a spade, or some instrument, even a simple instrument, to use it, to dig the hole, I depend on somebody else to deliver it, or I depend on some work I did before. Okay? Division of labor. Somebody does one thing, somebody else does another thing. It is important to keep this in mind. Even if I develop something completely new, I cannot think about anything. It's typical, otherwise I would be very rich and invent something and sell it for millions. Even then, I depend on something already that is knowledge, which is again something, cooperation, division of labor, specialization. Of course, on a very simple level, we do not really think about it, and we don't have to think about it, because it's part of everyday's action, if you want. Our parents talk to us, we learn a language, we get some friends, perhaps possibly our parents have friends and they are from another country, so we pick up another language. We just pick it up, we don't learn it. But then, at a later stage, we go to school. And somebody teaches us. Specialized in teaching English language. Specialized in teaching Chinese. Even to you learn Chinese, writing, understanding, etc. So it's part of a process, cooperation, division of labor. Cooperation and division of labor are two sides of the same medal. It's not one against the other. It's not one independent of the other. But they are part of an overall process. It's sometimes a conscious process. And sometimes there is some trade-off, if you want. It's the term, technical term for it. We get something in addition. We are going to school to learn English, but we learn at the same time something else. So there is something happening in this process, or as part of this process of production. And it is important to think about what is going into this process of production. Factors of production. We talked about factors of production during the first semester. If you go back to the slides, you may remember the circle of the private household, getting something, contributing, producing as worker, producing something and getting something out of this process as consumer. Go back to the slides. As I say, you always get a new perspective. Raw material, machines, and labor.
You are in effect trading a few minutes of your time for a few seconds of the time of all those who are, and by this principle, you are in effect trading a few minutes of your time for a few seconds of the time of all those thousands of people. What brought them together, induced them to cooperate?
So there's the essential part, if you want, of the entire process of production when it comes to determining the value. We invest time. We invest the time we need to produce something, and we invest the time to reproduce ourselves, to produce something tomorrow again. This is the core of the determination of value. This is what we invest. Now, it is apparently, seemingly, very simple. If you work in a factory, you may have a contract to start in the morning at 8 o'clock, no, 9 o'clock. That's the English saying, 9 to 5 job. You start at 9, you end at 5. That's exactly the time you invest. Okay? Again, yes, but be careful. You invest as well, indirectly, more time, namely that time you needed to be educated to do this job. You invest in some way as well the time you need to recreate yourself. Sleep. You have to sleep, and otherwise you will not function. At least not to the full extent. And at least not for everything. If you lack sleep, you may be able to do some things, but not everything. If you have to concentrate, you will have difficulties. So it is all this time that goes into the cost of production, labor. It's not just the actual labor, the time from 9 to 5, it's as well that time that makes you able to produce. Now, as I said last time, all this interest is only of interest under the condition of these four factors, or in the perspective of these four factors. Scarcity. If there is enough, we don't, as economists, we don't think about it. If there is abundance, we are not really interested in it. We are interested in things where we do not have enough, where we have to think about the distribution of things. It is about incentives, meaning I have to have a reason to do something. I have to be motivated to do something. This can be money. This can be something else. This can be money I get immediately after I do something. It can be money I get after 1 year, after 2 years. So in a way, this is an interesting question for you, or in looking at your situation. You invest time and money to study, to go here. Shorthand, it's stupid to do so, because you have to pay even for it, and instead of getting something for it. So this thing says you only do something if you get something for it, and if you get money out of it. We'll come back later to the money question. But here you do something actually to get a profit, a gain, something out of it later. So delayed outcome, delayed profit, delayed gain. Nobody pays you after this lecture. Attended, yes, 1.5 hour, 10 yuan. Would be great, wouldn't it? The problem is, you may get here, get the money, we're leaving, but then the motivation was only getting the money and not understanding anything. Now there is another problem with it. You go here, come to the lectures, hoping that at the end you will pass the exams and possibly pass them with good grades. Fair enough. And if you follow the lectures, if you follow everything, you will be able to do so. But passing the exams does not necessarily mean you understood everything. There are some very simple questions, as you know from the last exams. You just write it down and that's it. Now, if you looked on the mobile phone most of the time, you wouldn't even haven't been able to do that. But usually there had been very simple questions. Others had not been so simple. You had to think about it, and you had to think about what actually I said during the lectures. You had to revisit in your mind what I provided. Incentives matter. You do your cost-benefit analysis. Is it worthwhile to do whatsoever? Is it worthwhile to go to university? Is the benefit I get in terms of a better job, a better paid job, or whatever, is that so high that it is worthwhile, or is it better to stay at home or to go to other work where I don't need this education? Cost benefit. And then comparative advantage. If you are good in gardening, go and get a job as gardener. If you are good in academic work, go to do some academic studies. If you are good in, I don't know what kind of job where you need academic education, do that. Meaning you don't have to understand everything out of studying finance, even not in finance. But you need this as a foundation to do a job, I don't know, at a bank. So this matters. Scarcity, incentives, cost-benefit analysis, and comparative advantage as a kind of core issues. The time you invest in terms of outcome today or tomorrow. Today, tomorrow, or in long term. Now there is another fundamental concept in economics, used in economics, trying to get nearer to understand what we are actually doing. Because in a way I made a step, 2 steps ahead, and skipping one important step. It's always good to deal with figures, to put a number on something, and to have a clear calculation. Supply and demand. Use value, exchange value. I produce something not to have a storage full of pencils, but I want to sell them. And I will only produce so much, ideally, as much as I can sell. I start here. I start thinking about the production. And then I go to the market. Now, I mentioned these names before. It's Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mills, who kind of introduced the concept that is known as utilitarianism. And utilitarianism, which frequently is misunderstood, is in its core characterized by one fundamental contradiction. The one thing is the principle, and that's how it's known, it is about the greatest happiness for all. That's the standard phrase, the greatest happiness for all. Be happy. Smile. And for all means for all. Everybody should be happy. Happiness is something very vague. We cannot really say this makes people happy. This makes everybody happy. Some people like to walk, some people like cars, some people like fast cars, some people prefer to stay in bed and do nothing. Some people like to read, some people like to eat, some people like to eat this food, some people like to eat that food. Different prices. What they say, how they try to make it more viable, more understandable, a little bit, it is the greatest amount of pleasure and the minimum of pain. This is what people are looking for. Greatest amount of pleasure. It's still vague, but now we have, in a way, a comparison. Try what you like to, or do what you like to do, and try not to do what you dislike. Greatest pleasure, greatest amount of pleasure, a minimum of pain. As I said, there is a contradiction, and you find this in the textbook, that at that time, when Bentham wrote about this or worked on this, he said, actually, I want to invent a machine that can measure happiness. We still didn't manage this. So it's not possible to put your USB finger into the computer and you get the scale, happy, yes, no, to this extent. It's still very vague, very subjective. Now there is an instrument, a tool, which economists used and permanently use to overcome this difficulty. Because, of course, as economists, we have to deal with scarcity, incentives, and cost-benefit, and all the rest of it. We have to deal with risk and information. But we want to put figures onto it to make it possible to calculate the profit, to calculate our input into production, the time. Everybody wants to calculate as well the time, how much should I work to get how much income to do something I like. Now, what we do in economics we put a price on things. This is something for your homework. You will find it tonight on your blackboard. It's from Marshall, Alfred Marshall. Saying it is about price which a person is willing to pay for the fulfillment or satisfaction of his desire. It's a quote from Alfred Marshall and not from Samuelson, as I saw it at some stage. Be careful if you use the internet. They quote Samuelson and they quote Marshall and say it's Samuelson. It's Marshall, 1890 he wrote about it, 1890 he wrote about it, as well in terms of a utility function, is defined by the price, or prices, a person is willing to pay for the fulfillment or satisfaction of desire, of his desire. You will find this sentence and a little bit more on the internet. Sit down, understand it as we tried to understand this clip, and look at the different dimensions. At the different dimensions. I emphasize this because what Milton Friedman did, he emphasized the one side, the invisible hand. The invisible hand is only a very, very small part of the entire process, as we found out. It's the end of something that begins somewhere else. Keep this in mind. Try to think out loud, to discuss with your classmates this phrase, and we will discuss these questions next time. Write the questions down for yourself. Be honest to yourself in terms of this secures your learning. The utility function is somewhat easy to deal with if we only say, okay, there is one person and one product, and one person likes ice cream and has to think about marginality, how many ice cream do I want to buy? Now the problem is, as much as you like ice cream, if at all, at some stage you don't like it anymore. But it's not only about liking something, but it is as well, you need some other things. And actually you need other things more than ice cream. Go back to the notes from last semester. There was Maslow, the pyramid. We need nutrition, we need shelter, and at some stage later, we need things we don't really need. So, there is the difference between need and want. Some things we need, we have to have them. Some things we want. In economics, we are often using the term in a sloppy way, without making this distinction in a very clear way. But if I go to the market, it is of course a difference. How much do I spend for something I need? How much do I spend for something I want? Sometimes I spend more for something I want than for what I want, what I need. Be careful. Go through this step by step and think about exactly how we calculate actually such a function. The utility function is it's a very simple thing actually, that we calculate the amount of different goods, different commodities, including services, some people buy to be happy. It's a very simple thing. It's not simple when it comes to the calculation, because there are many products, there are many choices that we have to make, and there are these different dimensions to it we have to think about as well in terms of competitors. There the market is. Because if there is a good, scarcity is really an issue, the price goes up. If many people want this one product. So there's a second text there are actually two more texts on the internet. It's in one file. The second I'll just briefly quote In 1974, Richard Easterling, a California economist, examined hundreds of surveys that asked Americans how happy they were. His conclusion shocked his colleagues. He gave up his research. He found that the explosion in wealth created by the post-war boom had not made Americans happier. Levels of misery and contentment were the same in 1974 and 1945. Meaning, we have to think again and again about this assumption I mentioned last time. Economics thinks producing more increases welfare. At the same time, looking at this, there seems to be something wrong. This is America, 45 to 74. People got richer, meaning there had been more and more goods, commodities available. There had been more and more services available. In this respect of the invisible hand, people should have been happier because they produced more and more. They felt obliged to produce more and more, and at the same time, it didn't make them feel better. It takes some time to understand it. And I'm very mean now. I say, you won't understand it. You will not be able to understand it. And the reason is not because I think you are not smart or clever or intelligent. The reason is because there is not one answer. If you get the final solution to this, call immediately or ask me to call. You cannot propose yourself. I'll call in Stockholm, get the Nobel Prize for this person. There is no one answer. There is the answer of Keynesianism, an answer of monetarism. There are different answers, different approaches to it. There is the answer that Maslow, up to a certain amount, we depend on material goods, on this growth of GDP, but beyond this, it doesn't matter. We'll come back to the GDP question later. But this is the decisive point where we have to think about the contradictions in it. Think about it. Go through it step by step and look at the contradictions as well. So again, the task, if you want, look at the text, understand the text in its complexities, and then go there to think about the possible meaning, the possible different interpretations. There is one further point, we frequently talked about it, and it is one of the fundamental challenges as well, again something that is discussed again and again in economics. One of the problems with utilitarianism is it does not distinguish between needs and wants. Another point is that it is highly individualist. Meaning, it says basically everybody is working for him or herself. We all follow our own interest, and cooperation, division of labor, specialization only happens happens by accident. It's not a planned process. It's managed by this accidental working together. Now this is a matter that builds on a couple of presumptions, and we talked about them. And we said as well that they are somewhat problematic. We go back to this later. It's freedom, it's equality, it's property, and it is this egoism. And coming more or less to the end now, I want to refer back another time to what we talked about last time. Namely, question this pure individualist point. Put it into question, is it true that we all work individually without considering what we are doing in a larger context? As I said, even if I try to do something independent of others, I always depend in one way or another from others. People who deliver raw material, people who deliver knowledge. Even the fact of knowledge is a social fact. You speak Chinese, I speak English. You speak English, I don't speak Chinese. Let's leave it. Hello. So what we have, again, we look at the production in the simple, straightforward way. Time invested into the production of something or into the provision of something. 8 hours working day. The day I have to go to work, I go back from work. The day I need to for reproduction. The time I needed to be educated, and so on and so forth. Family, all this. So we talked about productivist, individualist, industrialist approach of economics. We do this in institutions, being it enterprises, be it its international trade rules, be it money. All these are institutions that matter. And that matter in different ways. Then we have social choices, public choices, meaning we do it in a framework of a statutory system, of a state system, of a societal system that influences our decisions. And then we behave not simply as rational beings. What we suggest on the market, we buy the cheapest thing, we invest the least pain into something that is least painful. But sometimes we do things where we don't have any profit, at least not in monetary terms, and where we get something out that may even be hurtful. So link it back to this, try to get this understanding, and we will narrow it down step by step. As I said, tonight you will get this information on the internet. Look at it, work through it, discuss it amongst yourself. We will discuss it next time. And if there's anything in between, herman@esos.eu. You have the email address and you can contact me. Thank you.